evening, I'm Diane in Hong Kong, and you're watching View TV News. Coming up on tonight's show. After months of intense debate, the public consultation on land supply ends today. We'll look at where Hong Kong is most likely to find more land from. U.S. authorities arrest a Chinese citizen in Chicago for allegedly helping to recruit defense contractors for the mainland government. And Chinese hot pot chain Haidilao Lao makes an early splash on the Hang Seng, but shares close lower on listing day. All right, first up tonight, trying to find a solution to Hong Kong's housing woes. After 5 months of intense debates, a public consultation on land supply is finally coming to an end. But do we have a consensus yet? Evelina Leung takes a look.
Where should we get more land to build more homes? That's the question the Land Supply Task Force had put to the public for 5 months. But after long, emotional debates, it doesn't seem like Hong Kong has reached a consensus on this thorny issue. One of the biggest controversies is the Hong Kong Golf Club in Fanling. Just yesterday, Stanley Wong, chairman of the Land Supply Task Force, said views on this plot of land are polarized.
Right now, we don't have any exact figures to say whether there is more support than opposition towards developing the golf course. What I can say is there's been a lot of opinions towards this suggestion.
The task force submitted a preliminary report to the chief executive earlier this week as reference for her upcoming policy address. In it, they listed out the 5 most discussed options. They include developing brownfield sites, private farmland in the new territories, sites leased to private clubs, reclamation outside Victoria Harbour, and building homes on country park peripheries. Among them, the report stated that brownfield sites was the only one that received wide public support. Acknowledging the controversy, the task force head tried to reassure Hong Kongers that the chief executive understands these are only preliminary findings. The public views collected will be passed on to the University of Hong Kong researchers for analysis, and the final report is expected by the end of the year.
Well, Evelina Leung now joins me in the studio to dig into this divisive issue. All right, Evelina, let's talk first about just how dire our land shortage issue is.
Well, Diane, according to the government's planning blueprint for the next 30 years, we need 4,800 hectares of land for the city's housing and economic needs. Now, officials have already identified 3,600 hectares, so we're still missing 1,200 hectares. That is equal to around 350 Tai Kwu Shing housing estates. So this is what this public consultation is all about, to find this missing 1,200 hectares of land. But bear in mind, some seem to think that the shortfall is much higher than this figure, because the projections do not include extra demand for healthcare facilities for Hong Kong's aging population and people's desire to live in larger homes to improve their quality of life.
Right, now the Land Supply Task Force, they were talking about throughout this consultation, brownfield sites seem to be the most welcomed in public opinion. But there are still some opposing voices. Can you talk about some of these?
Well, Diane, let me first explain what are brownfield sites. Brownfield sites refer to abandoned agricultural and rural land already developed for use. Some say one difficulty in developing brownfield sites is relocating the businesses occupying them. Now, these include those involved in container storage, heavy industrial scale parking spaces, vehicle repairs, and even recycling workshops. Some business owners say right now they choose brownfield sites for the operations because of the low rent. They fear their operational costs could shoot up if they have to move elsewhere. So they're now asking officials to build industrial buildings and rent it to them at reasonable prices before thinking about developing these plots of land. Now, some have also suggested, should I say, the city's brownfield sites are scattered and impractical to use.
Right. Well, it's interesting arguments over there. Thanks for that, Evelina. Let's move on to more land issues. Given the pressing land shortage issues, it's no surprise that many Hong Kongers are desperate to find an affordable home in the city. Long queues were seen at the Housing Authority offices this morning, with dozens lining up to get an application form for a batch of home ownership scheme flats. The flats on offer will now be sold at about half of their current market value. The application window is open from October the 3rd to the 16th. A lottery will then be carried out to combine these applications and the 150,000 applications received in the first round in March.
I never applied for these subsidized flats before because they're still too expensive. But this time the price is 52% of market value, so I guess I'll give it a shot.
The possibility is even slimmer than winning Mark 6. I will still try though. It's just filling in an application form.
Well, so far, the government is remaining silent about remarks by the US's top diplomat on the decision to ban the separatist Hong Kong National Party here. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in a statement that he's concerned by the ban. He said the US share core values with Hong Kong, including freedoms of expression, peaceful assembly and association, which must be, quote, vigorously protected. Pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong, meanwhile, says he's worried about the ever-expanding definition of threat to national security. He pointed out National Party figurehead Andy Chan had not in fact committed any violent acts.
Apart from vocalizing his opinions, Andy Chan never acted on his words. So whether it was sharing his views at the Foreign Correspondents Club or on the radio or internet, did he really deserve to be shut down? Even Junius Ho admitted there's a bottom line drawn for Hong Kong. But is this line drawn at violent actions, or does just speech count too?
To a suspected murder-suicide now. Police believe a woman was attacked while cleaning a commercial unit in a Sheung Wan building and are now trying to find links to a man whose body was found on the podium outside. A security guard called the police after finding the woman lying unconscious in a second-floor unit of Hua Chin International Building at around 8 a.m. Police found knife wounds on her neck and chest. She was rushed to hospital and died later. Officers then discovered the man's body on the building's fourth-floor podium and believe he fell to his death. In other news, a Chinese citizen living in Chicago has been arrested for allegedly helping Chinese authorities recruit engineers and scientists. According to a criminal complaint outlined by the U.S. Justice Department, Ji Chao-chuan was said to have been liaising with an intelligence officer at the Jiangsu Province Ministry of State Security. He was allegedly tasked with providing them with information on 8 individuals for possible recruitment. Most of them had worked in the U.S. defense sector. Ji is said to have arrived in the U.S. in 2013 to study before enlisting in the U.S. Army Reserves in 2016. A Beijing spokesman today said he had no understanding of the situation. All right, let's move on now to the latest from the world of business. Well, investors' early hunger for Chinese hot pot chain Hai Di Lao eased at the end of its listing day in Hong Kong. Shares leapt as much as 10% this morning, but ended up closing lower. While it mainly serves spicy Sichuan-style hot pot, Hai Di Lao gained a name for itself for offering free services and entertainment, such as manicures and board games, to waiting customers. The company raised almost $1 billion in its IPO, giving it a valuation of about $12 billion. Well, let's see how the rest of the market fared. The Hang Seng rose 1.2% to close at 27,817 points. Energy stocks did particularly well, with Brent crude trading around its highest in nearly 4 years. That lifted PetroChina up around 5%, the index's biggest gainer. Across the border, the Shanghai Composite ended the session up 0.92% at 2,781 points. Investors there appear to be shrugging off recent trade war concerns. While investors are also keeping an eye on the U.S. Federal Reserve, the central bank is due to wrap up a 2-day policy meeting later tonight. All expectations are for an interest rate hike, but the question is by how much? Financial markets are also focused on whether signs of an acceleration in U.S. economic growth will prompt the Fed to ramp up the pace of monetary policy tightening. Since the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the greenback, the city's monetary policy is likely to follow suit. Now, after earlier speculation, American fashion group Michael Kors has confirmed it's buying Italian luxury designer Versace. The deal is worth $2.2 billion and will be funded in cash, debt and shares. Michael Kors snapped up shoe brand Jimmy Choo last year and has made no secret of its ambition to acquire a high-end portfolio. As for Versace, the deal is being touted as crucial to its long-term success. That's according to Donatella Versace, who says she'll continue to lead the label's creative vision. Well, Nike has posted a rise in quarterly profit and revenue, but those numbers didn't seem to wow investors. Although the sportswear company booked nearly $10 billion in sales between June and August, some expected better margins. That said, Nike shares tumbling 4% after the US market closed overnight. Faced with a cocktail of troubles and uncertainties, German carmaker BMW has issued a profit warning. The company warned its pre-tax earnings would fall this year against earlier expectations for a flat outcome. Sonia Legg reports.
It's making advances in autonomous driving, but BMW's profits aren't going where they should be. The German carmaker says it's facing intense price competition after new emissions rules. That, on top of a global trade conflict and the uncertainty of Brexit, means a previous expectation for a flat outcome has been revised down. The news sent BMW shares down 4% and almost proved a point for a German industry body. Just hours earlier, BDI had forecast slower growth because of trade issues. And that's not the only pressure on the global economy.
Higher oil prices, slowing global economy, trade wars and rising US interest rates are 3 to 4 different factors that could significantly impact growth into 2019.
BMW is ahead of its peers when it comes to conforming with a new worldwide standard for emissions tests. But it's suffered because those behind the curve have been forced to cut prices to defend their market share. The operating margin in BMW's automotive division is now expected to be nearer 7%, rather than the group's target of 8 to 10%.
All right, time for a break now, but do stay with us. Up next, the leaders of the US and Iran trade taunts, threats and insults at the United Nations. We'll have more on the fiery war of words.
Infinite visions. View TV 6. No food.
Need some food.
No shelter.
I have to build up my shelter.
No fresh water.
There we go. I need this.
No tools.
This I can make use of.
No camera crew.
There's just not enough to gather here. There's not enough to hunt.
Just one man alone in the wilderness, surviving. Survivor Man, tonight at 8:30 on View TV 6. Take a trip to the land down under. Behind every native animal surviving in the wild.
Can we talk about this?
Or the furry babies living in different households.
This is a massive open gash. I don't think a positioning is too bad.
There's a dedicated veterinary team.
That's just such a good result.
Because animal lives matter.
Look after my girl.
Thank you so much.
Bondi Vet, Friday, Saturday and Sunday night at 8 on View TV 6. Hard-hitting investigative reports, newsmaker interviews, compelling human interest stories, life-changing reports. News magazine that draws you in. 2020, Saturday night at 9:30 on View TV 6.
In the enchanted land of Equestria, Unicorn Twilight Sparkle and her pony friends take on the adventure of a lifetime. Together, they face exciting challenges that they've never had before and discover the elements of harmony with honesty, kindness, laughter, generosity, loyalty, and magic. The main six learn about the most powerful magic of all, friendship. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. Tonight at 7:30 on View TV 6.
Welcome back. Many world leaders took to the stage in New York yesterday for the annual United Nations General Assembly. But U.S. President Donald Trump pulled focus with his fiery return to the podium, where he singled out Iran's, quote, corrupt dictatorship. Iran's president didn't take that criticism lying down, taunting Trump and his administration. Zach Gorman has the details.
The leaders of the United States and Iran traded verbal attacks on the world stage at the United Nations General Assembly on Tuesday. U.S. President Donald Trump calling Tehran a corrupt dictatorship.
Iran's leaders sow chaos, death, and destruction.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani retorted, accusing the American leader of, quote, fomenting extremist nationalism and racism, and even, quote, tendencies resembling a Nazi disposition.
The government of the United States, at least the current administration, seems determined to make all international institutions ineffectual.
The war of words coming as the Trump administration seems to have identified Tehran as its primary opponent at the UN gathering, a role last year occupied by North Korea. On the sidelines of the General Assembly, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called out Iran for supporting militant groups across the Middle East.
The Iranian regime's track record over the past 40 years has revealed it is among the worst violators of the UN Charter. It is truly an outlaw regime.
Trump has reimposed harsh sanctions on Tehran and pulled the U.S. out of the landmark multinational accord signed by President Barack Obama that put limits on Iran's nuclear program. Trump on Tuesday said he thinks punishing Iran will force its leaders to seek a new deal.
I think that at some point they're going to want to negotiate.
Iran's leader scoffing at that notion.
No state and nation can be brought to the negotiating table by force. What Iran says is clear. No war, no sanctions, no threats, no bullying. Just acting according to the law and the fulfillment of obligations.
On Wednesday, Trump will chair a session of the Security Council focused on weapons of mass destruction, nuclear proliferation, and Iran.
Well, elsewhere at the UN, several world leaders met on the sidelines to highlight female empowerment and access to education. British Prime Minister Theresa May emphasized that 130 million young girls worldwide aren't getting formal education, while her Canadian counterpart, Justin Trudeau, stressed that the job of moving females forward is on par with climate change. The UN has set a goal for every girl and boy to have the opportunity to complete 12 years of quality education by 2030. Well, Pope Francis has defended a landmark deal between the Vatican and China on the appointment of bishops. The pontiff says he'll have the final say on who's named and not the Beijing government. In future, new bishops will be proposed by members of local Catholic communities together with Chinese authorities. The names of the candidates will then be sent to the Vatican. But critics have labeled the agreement as a sellout to the mainland government. The once beloved American comedian Bill Cosby was marched out of court in cuffs yesterday after being sentenced to between 3 and 10 years in prison for sexual assault. The 81-year-old was found guilty in April of 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault. He's the first celebrity to be convicted of such crimes since the start of the Me Too movement. Cosby must spend at least 3 years in prison before he becomes eligible for supervised release. He could, though, end up behind bars for up to a decade. Well, in Malaysia, the corruption probe into state fund 1MDB is ramping up. The wife of former Malaysian Prime Minister Rajib Razak was questioned again today by the country's anti-graft agency. Our Southeast Asia correspondent Sandy Huang has the details.
Well, this was the second round of questioning regarding the missing money from 1MDB. The former First Lady had already been questioned for 3 hours back in June when the investigation reopened. Last week, anti-corruption officials said more charges were possible. Sources said the questions Rosema faced were mostly about her expensive purchases, including hormone-based anti-aging products from the U.S. worth over $240,000. The 66-year-old has long raised eyebrows for her extravagant lifestyle, many asking how she had been able to afford the luxury items on her husband's government salary. During raids on 6 properties linked to the family in June, police seized a staggering amount of expensive goods, including over 500 handbags, 400 watches, and 12,000 pieces of jewelry. Police described it as the biggest seizure in Malaysian history. The total market value of the goods was estimated to be about $270 million. Najib has said the items were mostly gifts to his family and had nothing to do with 1MDB. He's also pleaded not guilty to multiple counts of money laundering, corruption, abuse of power, and criminal breach of trust, and will face trial next year. Anti-graft officials are not denying that his wife Rosema may also face criminal charges.
Now, as the U.S. government battles to stem the sale and abuse of heroin and other opioids, the country's airports are increasingly becoming part of the front line in the war on drugs. Drug-filled packages with misleading labels have become a common sight at New York's JFK, where foot soldiers include mail sorters and a dog with a highly trained nose. Lisa Bernard reports.
This is Jack, a frontline soldier in the war against opioids. And that high-pitched howl you hear is actually from Jack's handler, Christopher Avila, commending his furry sidekick for successfully sniffing out a suspicious package. It's a typical Tuesday at the mail sorting room at New York City's John F. Kennedy Airport, a main entry point for fentanyl, the powerful, addictive synthetic opioid, often combined with heroin, that can kill a person with just a tiny 2-milligram dose.
Customs agents are finding more and more of this stuff every year. What's happening is Americans are going online, going on the dark web, and ordering fentanyl and other opioids as if buying a book off Amazon. The main source of fentanyl coming to the U.S. seems to be China.
With more than 100 opioid overdoses a day in the U.S., intercepting fentanyl is one of the biggest challenges facing law enforcement, says Assistant Customs Officer Kim Chikolela.
It's not like the old days where it's heroin, you just pop it in a test kit and right away you'll know what you're dealing with. Synthetics has become a real challenge. We have lab chemists here on a daily basis to interpret the actual powder that we find.
In an area labeled the detention center, customs officers use laser technology that most times can give an almost instant read on what the goods are.
So it came up as fentanyl.
That's an even deadlier type of fentanyl. All kinds of illegal drugs come through here, including fake Viagra and other nefarious items, such as potentially counterfeit money and knockoff MAC lipstick. The next step after nabbing fentanyl? Catching the bad guys themselves. Fentanyl found in this FedEx package was swapped out for coffee grounds, then sent on its way to its intended receiver, who was handcuffed shortly after these gentlemen scoped out the delivery to his door.
All right, time now to switch gears and check out the latest sports headlines. Football first, and more troubles for Jose Mourinho as his Manchester United side crashed out of the League Cup on penalties. United were beaten by Championship side Derby County, managed by one of Mourinho's former players, Frank Lampard. Derby were close to winning 2-1 in normal time after United keeper Sergio Romero was sent off in the 67th minute, but Marouane Fellaini grabbed an equaliser 5 minutes into stoppage time. With no extra time this season, the contest went straight to spot kicks and Derby won 8-7 with Phil Jones's effort saved by visiting keeper Scott Carson. Elsewhere, United's rivals and League Cup holders Manchester City cruised to a 3-0 win at Oxford United. In the German league, Bayern Munich were held to a 1-1 draw against Augsburg, ending their 4-match winning streak at the start of the season. Bayern struggled to break down the visitors early on, but looked to have won it when Arjen Robben's goal after the break But goalkeeper Manuel Neuer spilled a corner 4 minutes from time, and a 20-year-old Augsburg substitute nodded home the equaliser. Despite the draw, though, Bayern stayed 2 points clear of second place Werder Bremen. Well, Tiger Woods says he's determined to improve his dreadful personal record at the Ryder Cup when it starts on Friday. Fresh from his Tour Championship victory, the USA vice-captain warned the game's new crop that if they've always wanted to play him at his prime, now is the time. After missing the last 2 editions of the Europe versus US showdown, Woods is determined to be on the winning side this weekend. Woods has been involved in 1 US victory in 7 appearances. The Americans have not won on European soil since 1993. Well, sure set up for a good showdown there. All right, that's it for now. Join us again later this evening for an update on the stories that are shaping your world. I'm Diane. You're watching View TV News. We will see you later. Good night.
Coming up next, My Little Pony Friendship is